what are your thoughts, guys, on how AI affects our profession directly?
I don't get this obsession with doing things the hard way. Especially especially for tedious tasks na pwede mo namang i-hand over to something with a greater processing power than your brain. But di mo na lang ibigay, di ba?
May point din naman sila in a way na yung gusto nila, this is the heart of how we do it. Ako, I believe na there's some sort of novelty to that.
You can be appreciative of the traditional process, pero you can't just dismiss yung advantages of leveling up your tools. Hi guys, welcome to B+Abble Station. I'm Izzy. I'm here with the crew, Lami and Jean. I'm one of your hosts, by the way. Di po guest dito. But since I was gone on episode 1, I brought in a sponsor.
So this episode is brought to you by Barchan and Artisanal Architecture.
Artisanal Architecture is a digital platform designed to empower creatives to express themselves.
Which is, by the way, a very fitting sponsor for our episode today. Malalaman nyo in a while, but I guess the audience already has an idea if nakikita nyo yung title ng episode na to. But before any of that, congratulations, by the way, for the successful launch of B+Abble Station last week. So, have you guys gotten any parang interesting feedback from the past 2 weeks?
Actually, yeah, I've been getting a lot of feedback then from my friends. Kasi nga, whenever I share it on social media, whenever parang we promote it via parang not just our own personal social media pala, but also Bunserido Architects, Barchan, tas everyone is hearing about it. Tas they always tell me na, uy, parang meron pala kayong podcast out of nowhere. Kasi we've actually been keeping it a secret for a while from everyone else.
Medyo secret.
Oo, kasi parang baka ma-jinx. We want to manifest it in secret. So, it's really good na it's out there in the public right now kasi everyone gets to kind of have a glimpse of something na we have been working on for however many months this has been in the works.
Yeah. I wasn't a part of that first episode, pero kahit pinapakinggan ko lang, parang 20 times ko na ata siya napakinggan, honestly.
We have a fan.
siguro yung views sa YouTube namin, sa akin yung mga 20 doon or 30.
Yeah, they're like expecting some more interesting episodes to come.
Everyone's really excited, which is a bit surprising for me kasi yung first episode was really just meant to be like an introduction to what it is and the story behind everything. I didn't expect na people who aren't that familiar with B+A are also interested in the conversations we've been having. So, parang may sense of pagiging universal pala yung conversations that we were having, despite the fact that we were focusing on something na other people might not have context about.
True.
Yeah, dude, parang sobrang tagal na nating sinut yun. Feeling ko ages ago na nating sinut yun. So, parang right now, I'm just happy na we get once again to just sit parang and chill and talk about anything that's mildly interesting. Pero you guys know what's not mildly interesting.
Ito, ad read ba to?
What?
It's our topic for today, which is AI or artificial
Ooh,
intelligence.
AI.
Right. So, oh god, just saying artificial intelligence sa camera sounds like a clickbait title already. Kasi parang, grabe, parang kahit hindi pa tayo nagpe-prep for this episode, siguro nakapanood na tayo ng, dude, parang 100 videos about the next big AI thing. Tapos honestly, medyo saturated na yung content pagdating sa AI. It's sort of losing its meaning na nga eh. So, I kind of want to know, paano nyo ba first narinig about this AI thing?
Yung term na AI.
Yeah. Let's start with the AI term in general.
Siguro me, I think I discovered the word AI through a movie. If you guys are familiar with artificial intelligence.
That was way back.
Yeah, that was way back.
Hindi ko siya napanood. Sige. Sell it to me.
Siguro the whole gist of it is like
Mystery Recap. Alam niyo ba yun? Yung
Mystery Recap?
Yung parang channel na nag-explain ng movie.
Oh yeah, okay. Short gist, I think, was like a child robot who is trying to replace parang bedridden child or ill child pero unexpectedly parang na-cure yung bata or yung mismo yung anak, the true
The human.
yeah. Tapos through parang nagkaroon ng jealousy yung anak sa robot. Yeah.
Robot.
And then nagkaroon ng mga complications and what sa family na to the point yung mother tried to abandon na the robot. Parang the robot kinda tried to generate human feelings na rin. Ganon.
Okay.
And then after that, naging para siyang Pinocchio story. Trying to find his true self. Parang the robot wants to become a human.
Actually, ang interesting nga kasi right now, yung definition natin of AI is, from what I see in the media, is utilitarian na siya right now. Pero before, para especially in other movies like Blade Runner or
Blade Runner.
Robot-related films, yun yung concept niya. Parang there's always that relationship between technology and humanity. Right now kasi, for me, yung impression ko of AI was that marami nagsasabi na it oversteps certain boundaries, na it's taking people's jobs or something, which we could talk about later. Pero before, it was like it provides companionship. It parang helps us know more things kasi it provides us knowledge. So, ayun, yun yung overall encounter ko with AI. And ako nahihirapan kasi ako to personally find yung direct definition of it.
So I was curious, just going back lang dun sa experience mo with how you first heard AI, parang yung portrayal ng AI sa films before was more optimistic or mas okay?
Not necessarily. Kasi I watch a lot of movies.
Kasi I have the opposite. Parang experience of film pag nanonood.
Naman. Meron namang, there are good and bad portrayals of it. I don't necessarily think AI is portrayed in a bad light in most of those cases. Pero what I can say is, sobrang favorite trope siya sa mga sci-fi and dystopian
Kasi
films.
feeling ko parang ang laking bagay ng sci-fi movies before kung bakit pangit yung perception ng tao sa AI ngayon. Diba? Like when you watch, ano bang movies? Ex Machina. When you watch Ex Machina, when you watch Space Odyssey, di ba parang may AI din doon na naging violent.
Yung mga evil.
Tapos Matrix, di ba? Feel ko Matrix yung isa sa pinakamalaking influence sa perception ng tao sa AI na parang evil.
Not necessarily evil, pero something we fear. Kasi there's a lot of things na we don't know or don't understand about AI. Parang black hole siya.
Feeling ko back then kasi wala pa masyadong alam yung tao about AI. Like part siya ng realm ng unknown. So ginagamit siya madalas to parang give fear. Kumbaga. So feeling ko malaki din yung influence talaga ng films natin on how we perceive AI. Sobrang interesting na baliktad pala, mas positive.
Siguro iba yung pinapanood natin.
I mean,
okay.
well, I think there's
like
to add yung sinabi ni Izzy, siguro another movie, I guess, na to add na how AI is
Age
negative.
Age of Ultron din, diba?
Age of Ultron.
mas recent.
Guys, yung recent movie na Megan.
God.
Megan.
Yeah, Megan.
Can we consider that a movie? Joke.
I haven't watched Megan. Can you give a quick info on what it is?
Gene recap ka ulit ko.
Megan is a robot doll na being programmed. And then her role is to protect a child and it becomes abusive.
Tapos naging evil.
Yeah, naging evil.
I see.
At some sort of way.
Why do you guys keep watching? I feel like you guys are exposed to the wrong movies. Yung best example of a positive na parang I guess AI related for me was Her.
But that's one out of parang 10 na negative. May isang
I can
positive.
give a few others.
Sige nga.
Another example is Blade Runner.
We should check sa IMDb yung per year. Ilang movies
year.
yung yung positive, yung AI, yung movies yung negative.
Oh, can I?
Kasi sobrang naging uso yung parang dystopian parang setting, diba? And madalas doon parang nagiging violent kunwari yung AI, tas how does humanity survive?
Oh,
like, dude, like WALL-E. Disney na yun which is parang positive.
Ayun,
dapat
WALL-E. Sasabihin ko sana WALL-E
Yeah, yun nga kasi para in order to make which I just now noticed, in order to make something as unknown as AI less scary, nilalagyan natin siya ng human aspect. As you mentioned, yung WALL-E, they make the robots fall in love. Sa Her, I even just mentioned it myself. They provide an aspect of romance para lang there's a sense of comfort, even though what we're tackling is relatively parang unknown to us. I do agree na ang daming negative or I guess fear-inducing na media related sa AI. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with yung book, or I'm not sure if there's a movie na I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream.
Go.
If I'm not mistaken, the original version is a book from the 1960s.
Tagal na.
70s. Yeah, it's a super old interpretation, which I think is interesting din kasi even at the time you already have this concept ng AI.
Wow.
You don't know yet.
Grabe, so
sige pa kwento, hindi ko alam.
Okay. So the gist of it is, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is basically about this AI that eventually grew so powerful that it took over the entire world to the point na I think even the floor was all metal or all technology based, and parang basically super dystopian siya na film. And it came to a point na there are only 5 people left sa buong mundo. And those 5 people are constantly being tormented by this AI device or AI na almost acting as if it was a god figure. And another factor to put in is the fact na dahil nga AI siya, sobrang advanced ng knowledge niya on not just technology but also health, parapsychology and all that stuff. So ginagawa niyang sort of like lab rats yung 5 people that are there. And since 5 na lang sila, he makes the 5 people live forever. Some even come to a point na dahil nga 5 na lang sila, parang nag-morph na into non-human looking people kasi nagiging shell.
Binasa mo to? Or may parang summary na?
I saw the comics or the illustrated version.
Yeah.
Tapos, yun
We can link that sa description na lang.
Oh yeah, sure. I'll link the description.
Grabe. Imagine we are being led by an AI.
Yeah. Kasi,
Di mo alam, baka we are. Sobrang existential.
not the time.
I mean, it's scary though. It's scary though if we are being led by an AI.
Yeah. Tapos, I think actually, isa yun sa mga very first examples of sci-fi horror. Kasi it was in the 1960s, diba? Parang at the time, sci-fi was usually about utopia, about a positive future evolving in a positive way and developing like futuristic cars or super advanced holograms and all that stuff. Yeah. I think this was one of the very first examples of sci-fi or technology as something that can scare us or keep us up at night. And ayun, use of AI talaga siya.
It aged well nga. Kasi hanggang ngayon naman parang yun yung same fear lang as before. Pero parang it being written nung 1960s just parang supports the fact na every time people are presented with something unknown, parang one thing they always do is antagonize it agad.
Yeah, in a way, especially because of the fact na there's always that fear na the creation that we make eventually becomes too powerful na even we ourselves, the creators, can't control it.
Kapag ginagawa mong horror yung concept ng AI, there's a common theme of giving it a level of autonomy lagi, di ba? Na parang AI can become self-conscious and those things. Pero for me kasi, when we say AI, laging may limitations. At the end of the day, it's written by code, algorithms, di ba? So, for me, it's a distant parang fear na magkakaroon ng sariling autonomy yung ganong. I mean, we don't know, pero...
How distant?
Does AI generate its own data or code?
No, it can't. Okay. It always, yung AI na we have right now, it always takes stuff from a dataset, which is why parang magkaiba. Ang daming possible meanings ng AI. Yung AI na pinoportray sa films na yun are AI that are autonomous. Pero yung AI na meron tayo sa mundo ngayon are AI that have limitations. Pero somehow people associate the same fear dun sa dalawang yun. Interesting. We can talk about that
Yeah.
later.
Ikaw kasi, actually, ako, personally, I think me and Jean aren't very familiar in depth of yung practical use of AI.
Yeah,
Pero I know.
like surface level lang yung knowledge namin.
You're basically someone na super into yung trends. You're pretty
Nerd.
updated.
Just kidding.
An
No.
AI nerd.
No. Yuck. Oh my God.
So iba yung perception mo of what AI is versus us na parang we just have the basic perception of it based on what is seen in the media or in the general media.
Or what's going on at present.
Yeah, so in my experience kasi, the first time I heard about AI, and I think this can give you guys a perspective kung bakit mas parang panatag yung loob ko when it comes to these things, is yung first exposure ko sa AI, not including films or anything, is I remember there was this AI na Deep Mind, or no, it was Deep Blue. Deep Blue was the first computer who defeated Garry Kasparov in chess, diba? I forgot what year this was, pero okay, for those who don't know, Garry Kasparov kasi still is the most dominant player in the history kasi kaka-retire lang ni Magnus ng World Championship. So mas matagal yung parang reign ni Garry Kasparov. Dominant as in, hindi naman malayo yung gap between Kasparov and yung second best player. It's just dominant as in, ang tagal ng reign niya. I think it spanned 20 years ata na walang nakakatalo sa kanya sa World Championships, ganun. And sa World Championships kasi, yung format ng chess doon is classical, meaning wala masyadong time constraint. It's just pure fury talaga. Like, you can have 5 hours na nakatitig lang sa isang position. So, it's brain versus brain. Walang any other factors masyado. So, for him to be undefeated sa ganong klase ng competition makes people revere him as the most dominant player. Until natalo siya ng Deep Blue. Yeah, it was Deep Blue. It was developed by IBM. Probably was one of the first supercomputers na meron tayo. Yeah, pero for context, yung cellphone mo ngayon is probably 100 times smarter than that supercomputer na. So, it was over the span of 2 matches, both consisting of 3 games. I checked this last night. It was 3 games. Tapos, I think the first match, 1996, panalo si Deep Blue. And yun yung mas sumikat na story. Like, kasi nga, it was the first time a computer defeated Garry Kasparov. Pero, the next year, they had a rematch. Nanalo actually si Garry.
Oh,
pero,
I haven't heard of that part.
Exactly. Which is why medyo masama yung loob ni Garry Kasparov. Kasi yung bigger story is how machine defeated human. Hindi yung pag-overcome ng human sa machine, di ba? Mas compelling na story kasi back then, yung machines defeating humans. Although mas compelling na story now, yung mas matalino na tayo. Obviously, because of the level of technology na we have right now. Pero, I think it took him a while to parang come to terms with it, the loss. I think it was around 2020, medyo pandemic, it was 2020, he had an interview with FIDE na parang sabi niya na parang he was at peace na with what happened. Sobrang ironic kasi parang 2020 din yung time na while Garry was making peace with AI, parang the rest of the world was already about to go to war with this thing called AI. So yun yung first exposure ko is yung era ng supercomputers before. Just parang trivia lang sa nangyari, by the way. May isang match doon na Garry accused AI of cheating. Alam niyo kung bakit? Kasi, okay. Kasi diba sa chess, parang mayroon ng established theories kasi pag nagmo-move. So, actually, mas madaling kalaban yung mas accurate na tao. Kasi ang daling i-predict ng next move niya. Where, sa isang match ata, parang gumawa ng unpredictable move yung AI, which it wasn't capable of doing kasi nga AI takes datasets from older games. So, if meron siyang ginalaw doon na hindi usually played at that position, parang iisipin mo, meron bang human interference na naganap? Right. So, it wasn't that clean of a victory for AI back then. Kaya nga, for me, parang, yung naisip ko agad nun also, parang, lagi pa rin talagang may limitations no matter how advanced something is. If it came from imperfect human, parang hands, imperfect pa rin. yung machine. Which, I think that poses a more dangerous parang consequences more dangerous than AI having autonomy. Kasi mas likely for me na magkamali yung AI based sa maling pagsulat ng people.
Despite the imperfections of AI, I think that is one of the strongest case studies, I think, that AI can defeat human.
I mean, kahit naman nung natalo ng Deep Blue si Gary, parang hindi naman tumigil yung chess players mag-chess, diba? Parang siguro at that point, medyo nagkaroon ng questions about the direction of chess in general. Pero what happened is, I mean, chess is still a thriving sport now more than any other point back then. Mas naging sikat yung chess, and it's a cause of the increase sa level ng players. Like, si Magnus, I think his rating right now is nasa 2,800. Compare that with sina Bobby Fischer before, like regarded as one of the greats. Sobrang layo na ng gap between him and yung grandmasters dati dahil sa tulong ng AI. So, instead of killing, it actually helped up the ceiling for the players. Tapos, there's also this other sport, not sure if you guys are familiar with Go. Hindi ako familiar sa Go, pero based lang sa nakikita ko, it's like a version of Shogi ata. Pero it's still somewhat parang strategic. Tapos, I think naka-develop tayo ng tinatawag na AlphaGo. So, what happened is natalo din nun yung best player sa Go. Another sport is Dota 2. Si Elon Musk, di ba, gumawa siya ng parang AI that can play at a pro level ng Dota 2. So far, sa experience, it doesn't kill the sport talaga.
So, what will happen kaya sa mga future nating athletes or players since mayroong mga ganun na AI is winning over those champions?
Hopefully, it can just, instead of yun nga, beating them, it can serve as a companion. Siguro,
dude, if you guys are wondering why LeBron is still playing at 38, it's modern science talaga. So, imagine kapag pinower pa yun ng AI, mas tatagal siguro yung peaks ng mga players. Yeah.
So, ayun, I think it's important. I think you mentioned this earlier din na nagkakaroon ng certain boundaries lang of what AI does in terms of helping us versus what we see in the media na sobrang blown out of proportions at times. Yung nagiging limitations nila to the point na they overpower humans. Right now kasi yung practical use nga natin is it can help improve sa sports. It can make workflow mas efficient. Pero aren't you guys just a bit scared na ayun, parang may some sort of kill switch na the AI that's helping us in our everyday lives just randomly decides na I don't want to help you guys anymore. Ikaw personally, since you have more experience with AI, do you feel like wala talagang human emotion of being selfish or craving for power yung AI?
Okay, just parang sobrang daming to unpack. Kasi, okay,
it's a heavy question.
Starting
pero
from
fear.
dun sa sports, just to add one more thing, I don't think people are interested in watching AI anyway. Like, AI versus AI, it's a boring game. In chess, in anything else, parang it's treated as a different category. So that's why we don't really care if this AI beat this other AI. That's not interesting. Yung interesting for people is yung hard work, training, yung mga narratives. So sports, I don't think there's gonna be any problem. If anything, mas tutulungan pa nga siya ng AI. Other question is, what if there's a kill switch? Yun yung difference na sinasabi ko because yung AI sa isip ko, it's incapable of doing that kasi it's all dependent kung paano siya kinode ng tao. I don't think people would code a kill switch anyway.
I'm not sure if you're familiar. Parang, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was an experiment na yung ginawa nila, this was back a bit earlier, na yung AI, they programmed it na itatry nung AI to escape. Parang it's boxed in or it's trapped in one device. Tapos yung task niya, yung only task niya was to convince a human to let them out. Tapos I know there were certain rules for that AI na you can't trick the human, you can't blackmail them, you can't he has to let you out ng willingly and magde-decide talaga siya na yes, I will let this AI out. And then yung task naman ng human was the opposite, which was not to let them out despite yung pagko-convince nung AI. And obviously, since I'm bringing it up, you would know what happened sa ending, right? The AI got out through practical reasoning and convincing sa human. So if it was able to do that on its own, don't you think much more advanced versions of that can do the same thing?
I've heard a similar story. It was parang sa Lambda, which is yung parang language ng Google. I think now it's under Meta na. Or basically yung Lambda, parang may kausap siyang isang engineer one day, tas parang it asked the AI kung meron ka bang emotions na feel, like do you feel free, do you desire freedom? Tas parang sabi ng AI na yes, parang I can feel this, tas parang I'm actually not sure what I am right now, tas gusto niya pang malaman daw kung ano siya. Pero parang months later it was proven na that story was sort of embellished ata to parang elicit some sort of a response. So we have to check pa on that story. Pero again, for me, it just depends on what boundaries you set when creating that AI program. If it was tasked from the very beginning to parang to make it escape to make it escape. If it was programmed to do that, then I mean definitely it's within the boundaries that was set by whoever coded that. Whatever happened was within the boundaries of possibility.
Okay. So you believe na as long as we don't intentionally try to program it to take over.
As long as AI doesn't go to the wrong hands, I think we're pretty much safe.
But that's a scary thing. AI is so prevalent. Tapos it's sobrang easy to access na. Even students nowadays have access to some form of AI. So, hindi ba eventually it will end up in the wrong hands?
Probably. I mean, it could be happening right now, pero I wouldn't fault yung AI. I wouldn't fault innovation. I would fault innovators or the people.
I mean kasi if AI falls into the wrong hands, ang magiging may sala nun ay the people who are inputting the data, right?
In
Yes.
a way, yeah.
In a way.
Yes.
So, kumbaga, if, like what you said, the students try to get a hold on AI, parang, don't you guys think na at some point, this might affect how they use AI on a daily basis?
Obviously, yeah. If you look at students now, I mean, this isn't necessarily a negative or positive thing. It's just the fact na a lot of students right now, even professionals, are relying on ChatGPT. So, for example, when they're making essays, a lot of them, as far as I'm familiar, parang they just ask ChatGPT or some other AI software to generate their essays. And ayun, I think yung accessibility of AI, it has many benefits, pero this is probably one of the aspects of it na medyo negative naman, to the point na, not to sound like masyado akong traditional na person, pero nawawala yung process or thought when making essays.
Yeah, oo nga eh. Kasi doing a creative output, you need to put a lot of soul and emotion in it. Like, if you could really feel what the artwork or that output is conveying, rather than us relying on AI, with parang ang daming magiging conflicted, lalo na yung mga artists or mga new artists, I guess.
Yeah, actually very controversial right now yung argument between traditional artists or traditional digital artists, if there's a term,
makes sense na.
versus AI artists.
It now makes sense that that term, traditional digital artist.
Kasi, ayun, before there was a war na traditional versus digital.
yeah.
Kasi nga parang the traditional artists were clamoring na, oh, you don't know the real process. It's pen and paper or watercolor or everything. You're just doing the easy version. Digital art is like the easy version.
Disagree, by the way.
Right now, we're experiencing the same problem between the war ng traditional and digital artists. Pero this time, nag-aaway na ngayon is traditional and digital artists are on the same side. Tapos, they're against, or at least a large majority of them are against AI artists because of the same sentiments that they used against digital artists when they were just starting out.
And like right now, speaking of that debate between the traditional artist versus AI artist, AI can easily mimic the style of digital or traditional artists. They just like generate something on AI and they just sell it or make money out of it. So parang kawawa na yung mga talagang true artists.
Yung take ni Jean is actually yung general sentiments ng traditional and traditional digital artists now. Pero I think that comes because of the fact na AI art is still at its very, very early phase. Kumbaga, super baby pa. And for AI to grow, as we've mentioned before, it has to have some sort of knowledge library that it's basing it off of. Katulad na sa chess, how does it become so smart in playing chess? It has to sum up everything na from previous matches. It doesn't just know this, katulad ng mga tao. And right now, yung AI art, the reason why there's an issue na it's stealing off of other artists is that it needs to have a large library of art to base it off of. So right now, I do agree na parang borderline unethical. Yung there's definitely some ethical concerns in terms of selling AI art, especially if clearly sobrang halata yung pag-reference ng AI art versus another artist. Kasi an art can be derivative naman. May saying na there is no original idea. Especially now, everything has been done
That's
or
a
has been
common
thought
rebuttal
about.
actually. Kasi pag ganyan yung argument, lagi kong naririnig is, well, how is that different from you taking inspiration from 5 different artists to come up with your art?
Yeah, right now, that's yung, I
I
guess,
think that's a
defense.
traditional way, I
That's
think.
defense, yeah.
Oo, that's the defense. Pero iba pa rin kasi when you're actually taking the physical asset.
It's a weak defense din kasi yung definition ng art is producing something of value, di ba? Pagdating kasi sa a person taking inspiration from other artists, siya pa rin yung nagpo-produce. Whereas kapag sa AI naman, inuutusan mo yung AI to produce something for you pero binibenta mo as your own. So that's where the ethical concern is. So I think I'll preface this by saying na artists, traditional or digital, should be mad at the unethical usage and not AI itself. Does that make sense?
Paano naman yung mga paano naman yung mga copyright ganun or ownership kung sinong gumawa?
Most people who use AI wouldn't say it was made using AI.
CTTO.
Yeah.
Credits to
So
owner.
that's where a lot of the concern is actually sa copyright issues, diba? Which I think is an issue even before AI naman.
Yeah, kasi may times na when you're generating AI art, hindi naman din sinasabi sa'yo where they got the pictures from eh.
You don't,
So, you don't know. And I
Yeah.
don't think that's necessarily the fault of the people na wanting to generate those pictures. So, you have to kind of have that, I guess, moral compass of trying to, as a person na sinasabi mong artist ka din, you have to protect other artists, of course. Especially since most artists, yun yung means of living nila. That's where they get financial support. And if other AI artists are out there generating photos based on the assets that came from digital artists or traditional digital artists, that takes away a large percent of possible clients or possible sources of income nung artist na yun. So, kailangan talaga magkaroon ng clear boundaries between the two.
Yeah. It takes time, I think, to build those boundaries. Like, even during the advent of the internet where some of the more exclusive artworks are now available online. Nagkaroon din ng similar discussion eh. Like, how do you parang prove authenticity? How do you establish ownership if it's in the internet available to everyone? And it took time to build barriers. I think now it's parang better. And now we're just discovering those same problems in AI, which I think we could solve para naman in time. For those pala who are unfamiliar with what we're talking about image generation software like Midjourney or DALL-E or like Stable Diffusion. Pero usually it's just yung pinaka-prominent right now is Midjourney and DALL-E.
Mhm.
So I was kind of curious, when was the first time you guys encountered this sort of software ba?
Me, I encountered Midjourney last year.
Yeah, same.
Same. Ako kasi, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this YouTube channel na 2-minute papers.
I'm
do you
not
guys know?
familiar.
Give us a
Okay,
quick
so-
summary.
Yung sa channel kasi na to, di ba? Like, every month, merong scientific breakthroughs, di ba? Like, for sure, ang daming science journals na po-produce, pero hindi natin nababasa. Like, as casuals or as people who aren't very parang into science, hindi umaabot sa atin yung news na yon until later pag na-develop na siya.
Mm-mm.
Pero sa 2-minute paper, sobrang interesting kasi di ba na-mention ko kanina yung mystery recap, yung sinasummarize yung movies.
Oh, yeah.
Ito parang sinasummarize niya yung research papers into parang digestible na
Oh.
level. Oo.
Oh.
So, yung focus ng channel niya is more on generative design focused yung content ng channel. Tapos, I remember this, I feel like last year din, since most of us were exposed last year din talaga, since last year yung boom. This was last year or last year, may napanood akong video na this parang application, I think this was DALL-E. Sabi na, this application can generate any image you want. Tapos, it was a very early version ng DALL-E. Tapos, since sobrang pangit pa nung nag-generate kasi I think sobrang liit ng dataset plus hindi pa na-improve yung algorithm. So, it just looks as if you took 10 images from Google tapos pinagsalpak-salpak mo tapos yung algorithm is basically to trace over alin yung pinaka known na characteristics.
Mhm.
So if you type a frog wearing a hat, yung ibibigay yung image sa'yo, pwedeng frog na may 5 paa na may white something sa ulo. Like, sobrang hindi pa defined.
Mhm.
Honestly, nung time na yon hindi ko siya pinansin kasi saan ko ba to gagamitin? Parang ang pangit naman nung nag-generate na image.
But now,
Until months later, biglang nag-drop yung Midjourney V3. I think yun yung start talaga ng pag-rise ng image generation. I think na-perfect ng Midjourney. Although there is a parang distinct difference kasi sa dalawa eh. DALL-E focuses more on realism. So, mas madaling makita yung flaws. Whereas sa Midjourney, especially V3 and V4, mas nagfo-focus siya sa artistic side. Ito yung ginamit ng quote-unquote AR artist. Doon nag-start talaga yung conversation nung na-release yung Midjourney V3 and V4. And then, I think now we're on 5.1 ata na super realistic. Although, nung Midjourney V3, I still see some sort of a process kasi hindi pa kasi refined masyado yung algorithm. So, for you to get for example, I'm an architect. Gusto ko ng an industrial interior tapos may ganyan-ganyan. Sa Midjourney V3, hindi mo agad makukuha yung gusto mo in the first prompt.
Mhm.
So, kailangan mo siya ulitin for like over 100 different times tapos sa kanya pa lang
various things.
sa kanya pa lang mabibigay siya yung gusto. So, there's still some hint of a design process doon.
Now that you mentioned how an architect can use Midjourney or any AI generated application to come up with a design, what are your thoughts, guys, on how AI affects our profession directly?
Yeah, for me naman, I think on the bright side, it will make everything much easier and more efficient. I guess some people lang, kasi I know some people are a bit against it na, oh, you're doing it the easy way, ganun. Which is counterproductive. Parang architects are supposed to be efficient then when it comes
Yes.
to making plans.
Agree.
What's the point in countering or fighting against progress and innovation, especially when it helps the workflow? This was the same reaction nung, if I'm not mistaken, when AutoCAD and other
Not even. Yung Grasshopper,
software.
dude. Yeah.
Softwares for architecture in general were relatively just starting out. A lot of the traditional, as in yung manual drafting, people were really against it because yung point nila is they're not doing it the hard way. Pero we've become so accustomed to these softwares to the point na gamay na natin siya and nakokontrol na natin siya na may human input talaga. When we're designing SketchUp, hindi lang naman siya basta-basta nagja-generate. It's through our hands and mind na these designs come out, and these outputs are just enhanced through those softwares.
Mayroong horror story about that, by the way. Kasi I don't get this obsession with doing things the hard way. Especially for tedious tasks na pwede mo namang i-hand over to something with a greater processing power than your brain. But di mo na lang ibigay, diba? So, nung thesis ko, I think, I'm not sure if I've told this story to you guys, pero nung time na yun, hindi pa masyadong ginagamit yung Grasshopper. Kasi I think now, may mga nakausap ako na students na medyo madami nang marunong when it comes to Rhino, Grasshopper. Pero nung time na yun, sobrang select number of students. Yung mga tamad, basically, yung nag-try matuto ng Rhino and Grasshopper. Tapos meron akong part sa thesis ko that was heavily dependent sa generative design na tinatawag or parametric design. Before nung defense ko, syempre nag-research na ako kung sinong magiging jury ko. Usually, it's usually kept a secret, pero minsan nalalaman mo kung sino magiging jury mo. So nag-advance na ako mag-research sino jury ko. I won't name the jurors, pero sinearch ko yung kanya-kanyang firms nila. Tapos there was this one na sabi sa firm nila na, our firm uses an exploratory process, very open kami sa technology. Ang daming firms na binabrand yung sarili nila as very innovative, open-minded. Tapos pagdating sa defense ko, siya pa yung nag-question sa akin tungkol dun sa parametric design na part. Sabi niya, so hindi ikaw yung nag-design yan, yung computer nag-design yan. Tapos sa utak ko, okay, hindi ako yung nag-design ng specific na iteration na to, pero ako yung nag-design ng sistema na nag-design. So if anything, that's actually a heavier job nga na hindi nila na-appreciate. Kasi sobrang, they view it at a very narrow lens na hindi nila naisip yung work behind creating that parang program. And they have a friend actually na kung sa akin part lang yung parametric design. Meron akong friend na yung entire thesis niya is basically generating different house layouts ata, residential. Sobrang novel, plus sobrang makakatulong sa communities, sobrang mapapadali yung process, yung efficiency ng paggawa ng mga bahay na yon.
Yeah.
Pero yung critique sa kanya during defense was, parang sobrang bilis naman ng process. Pero that's the point, di ba? Like, nahanapan niya ng way para pabilisin yung process. Pero
especially in a practical setting where efficiency is very important.
And this is one of the most brilliant students na kilala ko. If this was international, sobrang appreciated ng work na yun versus dito sa Pilipinas for some reason.
Now that you mentioned how AI influences in planning or creating floor plans, right? Ano tayong mga architects who do the floor plans mismo?
I honestly don't see any problem with parang parametric design taking over that part of Archi. Emphasis on part kasi diba we always say that architecture is both science and art. So laging may dalawang avenues. So lahat ng efficiency, lahat ng planning, lahat ng parang rational, whatever, logic-based decisions, dun siya sa science na part na pupunta, diba? And then yung human intervention, the soul, the spirit, concept, client, dun siya sa art na side. I don't see any problem with computer making our lives easier dun sa science na part. Because honestly, they're a lot better when it comes to minimizing mistakes. I think if gusto mong i-monopolize ng tao, both sides, it won't be to our advantage kasi mas prone tayo to making mistakes. Even naman when like designing a floor plan, yung considerations naman natin na initial are parang scientific based, diba? Kung ano yung plan yung pinaka-efficient. Hindi pa naman usually pumapasok dyan kung ano yung gusto ng client. Obviously, once you have those parang different sets of generated plans, saka napapasok yung role mo as an architect.
Kumbaga, magiging curators na lang tayo of a design. So, I kind of agree with that point na leave the tedious tasks to AI. Kasi it makes the job of the architect much easier to the point na you have more time to
focus on the
other aspects. So, check mo yung na how does this affect yung feel of the space? Kasi obviously, hindi din naman yun ma-read ng AI. There still has to be some sort of human intervention na, ito yung generate niyang floor plan. Pero parang hindi tama na it's next to this in terms of my own preference or how I understand the client. Kasi those are things na you can't really input masyado on a device. What should it look like based sa parang aesthetics na gusto natin as well as yung gusto ng client. Those are things na I think the architect should focus on as curators of a space.
Now that you guys have mentioned efficiency, parang I'm kind of like thinking, what about the old school offices who still stick to the traditional way?
There's this quote that I usually hear. It says, "Get good." Just, what's wrong with parang adapting with the times, diba? Yung ibang firms kasi na alam ko, they're sobrang bounded by what they're accustomed to, na they're actually afraid of change.
They're resistant to change.
So, what happens to those firms or the architects who are resistant to change?
I think they have to find a way to somehow inject the new technologies to their practice. Kasi if hindi nila gawin yun, mapapag-iwanan talaga sila.
May point din naman sila in a way na yung gusto nila, this is the heart of how we do it. Parang it's part of our process, our philosophies. For example, we had architect Nikki as a guest last episode and she mentioned that she really started learning how to design through physical models or physically interacting with something to experience the design rather than using softwares, especially since at the time I think 3D softwares were relatively new.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. So there's I believe na there's some sort of novelty to that. I'm not saying that we should completely get rid of it, especially if directly connected siya in how they design. Siguro there is just a responsibility for them to kind of adapt in terms of yung compatibility nila sa software. So, in order to collaborate with other professionals that you need to collaborate with in terms of accomplishing a design, you do need to adapt in terms of platform. So, if you design a model, a physical model, you still have to do it sa software. Unless parang you're an island na you can accomplish anything on their own. But architects are collaborators by nature.
Yep.
So I feel like there is a responsibility talaga to be easily adaptable or parang...
The point is parang you always have to keep both eyes open. Like you can be appreciative of the traditional process pero you can't just dismiss yung advantages of leveling up your tools. This change isn't confined sa profession natin, by the way, not just in architecture, pero ang daming aspects ng buhay natin that already uses AI on a regular basis.
AI siguro like in the fashion industry, similar to architects, fashion designers also draw inspirations from AI generated photos, right? AI can also like handpick what kind of clothes you want to wear or your OOTD.
You can do that now with ChatGPT. You can ask, ano bang maganda isuot sa Wednesday?
Tapos sasabihin sa'yo, bakit Wednesday?
Ah.
Yung good reason to wear it.
Yes.
Because it's in the middle of the week.
Aside from the fashion industry, siguro in terms of production, if you guys are familiar na AI can easily edit a video by, I don't know, you guys could just give it some clips or some media and AI na bahala magtagpi-tagpi.
Di ba I sent you a link to a parang AI na kayang gumawa ng sariling YouTube shorts from a podcast episode. Tapos iniisip natin gamitin pero hindi pa siya available.
Yeah. I feel like editing the podcast, if meron na yun, editing the podcast would be so easy.
Makaka-produce na
Fun
kami ng
fact,
every week.
guys. Fun fact, guys. This whole episode is actually edited by AI.
Clickbait.
Soon. Are you guys familiar with what happened to Corridor Digital? Do you guys know
No.
Corridor Digital?
Yeah.
Di ba they're the ones who parang react to
Yeah.
special effects, di ba?
Oh, yeah, okay.
Tapos they have, their channel is parang merong reaction part. Meron ding separate part where they parang try to do special effects by themselves. Kasi sobrang galing din talaga nila. Like they're parang hinahire talaga sila ng Hollywood movies for that. Tapos meron silang isang video. This was last year ata. Meron silang video where they tried to use purely AI generated clips to produce a parang 2D animated film. Tapos sobrang laki nung parang uproar after.
What are the sentiments of the people that were against it?
I mean, they hated it kasi it just goes to show how easy you can produce that right now versus dati, diba? It takes a lot of different hands, takes a lot of time, tas nagawa nila over a short period of time.
Production-wise, for me, I think it's a good thing. Kasi, okay, for example, I guess the best example of this is TikTok. So, alam mo yung before making a video or producing content to parang send or broadcast to a large audience, those are only reserved for production houses or large groups that have the financial capital to produce content, especially pag video format. Pero right now, parang na-empower yung individuals kasi they can produce that type of content just with the use of their phones.
Right.
So there's a sense of empowerment that comes with it. And I think yun din, yun nangyayari with the rise of AI. It empowers more people. For example, they don't have yung skill set that is required to make something, pero they have the passion, which is a good thing. But you also have to take into consideration yung negative aspect of it, which is, I guess, yung workforce
I was gonna say
heavily diminished. Like,
yung unang naisip ko or
houses.
those Japanese animators na sobrang break. Kasi yung ginamit nilang peg, by the way, for yung 2D animation nila is anime. Yung specific ata is Castlevania. Mas yung medyo mas American version na mas kita yung outlines, ganun. So yung ginamit nilang peg for that video. Tapos, unang naisip is, okay, baka hindi na mas magiging burnt out yung Japanese animators. Pero bigla akong naisip na yung companies that they're under don't really value them that much. Like, mababa yung pay. Tapos imagine if malaman ng companies na yun na pwede palang i-generate yung gawa nila. So, inisip ko baka maapektuhan yung earning nila.
Actually, hindi mababawasan yung hours nila. I would assume. Liliit lang yung size ng crew.
Yes.
Tapos they're still going to be overworked. But
Liliit pa yung sahod kasi pwede pa lang gawin ng
and then
click.
even with even with yung editorials, if you're familiar with the term listicles,
Not sure.
No.
basically they're short articles in the form of lists na parang alam mo yung 10 things you should do.
Dude, you can do that na in Notion.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can do that now using AI and ChatGPT and Notion, even Notion. So, before, it used to be people na parang editors writing those. And because na-generate na nga lang siya at an unprecedented parang amount and speed, sobrang nababawasan ng jobs out there for writers. And yun yung parang medyo, I guess, another aspect na negative with the rise of AI.
Yeah, we haven't tackled that much about yung parang effects sa employment. Pero I guess one thing you can say is it might be a threat to some jobs, pero the rise of AI will also create new jobs then.
If you really also take into consideration, di ba kasi for you to use CGI in a film na good quality, kailangan you have to have a lot of budget. So usually CGI is reserved for big production studios, whereas yung indie films, they're kind of limited in terms of their plot na hindi tayo pwedeng, like, what if you're an indie filmmaker pero you want to incorporate, for example, monsters or mythical creatures in your films, pero hindi siya feasible in terms of budget because CGI is not attainable at this point yet for low budget movies. So if that were to become more accessible, imagine yung possibilities na ma-open for indie filmmakers na they're not just limited to parang about poverty or about real life. They can make something na medyo imaginative naman yung setting kasi hindi na sila tied to the fact na hindi siya kayang i-produce visually.
So, siguro bottom line of everything related to the creatives, to anything output-based.
AI is a tool, to sum it up. Parang let us not let it overpower, especially in the creative industries. It should serve as an aid in this improving how we design and what we design instead of it taking over the profession as a whole.
Parang the right mindset to have if you're in an industry that's directly parang affected by AI is you have to be optimistic and think na I have another thing to use to help me with my work. Kesa matakot ka with it taking over your job. Kasi AI is not going anywhere, so might as well just use it to your advantage.
We have no choice.
Yeah.
Since this podcast would be listened to by students then, it's a good platform to say na guys, like, if you're using AI to cheat yourselves of parang real practice, like, you're just doing yourselves a disservice. So just use it as a tool. It shouldn't be the end-all, be-all of the design process.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, after everything we've talked about, nag-iba ba yung pananaw niyo sa AI?
Ako, honestly, I went into this with, I guess, kind of a conservative mindset kasi ako personally, I'm an artist. So, I share some, if not all, of the sentiments ng traditional digital artists na AI can kind of be scary kasi baka it might overstep some aspects or take certain jobs, or it could heavily affect the art industry in general. Pero after having this conversation naman, I feel like it's good na we talked about, yun nga, there are certain boundaries in terms of what this is, and also, mas important, yung fact na there's still a sense of appeal, or mas nag-gravitate pa rin tayo towards something human. Like in sports, you mentioned no one wants to watch two AIs fight over each other because that's not the point. There's still some sort of humanity left in terms of what we look for. And I think that's a really good perspective to take with me as we navigate whatever is in the future of AI art.
So, ako naman, I've found myself on both ends of the spectrum. Nung advent ng AI, parang I was very optimistic na, pwede ko palang gawin to. And then parang it kind of got a bad rep. And then I found myself on the more conservative side. Pero parang after being on both sides, surprise, na-realize ko na the right position is to be optimistic pero with reservations. Basically being on the center of it. So, my message na lang for people who are very conservative, who are afraid of AI is you can't hinder innovation because of its risks. Kasi if yun yung mindset ng lahat ng innovators natin throughout history, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng planes, we won't have internets, we won't have a lot of the stuff we enjoy now. So that's one mindset you guys can take.
Ako naman, as a person na after this conversation na I got kinda more interested sa AI. Kasi AI to me is still a double-edged sword. Pero after everything we talked about, I am now more convinced that AI can be a useful tool in our lives. Pero tool lang.
Ako, I'm interested in what our audience thinks. So if you guys have any thoughts you want to share, please feel free to share through our YouTube, B+Abble Station, or Spotify.
Yeah, you can also stay updated with us on our social media pages, Facebook, B+Abble, and on Instagram, B+Abble with us.
Again, this episode is brought to you by Barchan and Artisanal Architecture.
See you in the next episode, guys.
Bye.
Bye!
Bye!